Hey guys, welcome to my new movie review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new Coen Brothers film, Hail Caesar. This film is about a Hollywood fixer, quote unquote, who in the 1950s works within the film studios. If an actor, or actress, or director, or producer, or whatever you basically anybody who works in a film studio, if any of them are messing up, if any of them are behind schedule or doing something that's interfering with the production, it's basically this guy's job to go around and make sure that everybody's back in line, that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that big budget productions don't get behind schedule, that I guess one scenario I can share without spoiling the movie is like if an actress gets pregnant while filming the movie, how can they cover that up so it's not going to ruin the rest of the movie and that kind of thing. So it's like I said, this guy really is a Hollywood fixer. He's really making sure that everything's in line, that things aren't messing up, that um, kind of like in the case of this movie, if this actor, this big actor from this big budget production gets abducted, how are we going to get him back? How can we track down who might have had a grudge against this guy? So that's another key thing about the movie is he has to figure out where this actor went for this big budget Hail Caesar production, you know, kind of this spoof on Ben-Hur in a way. They had to figure out how he got abducted, who abducted him, who might have had a grudge against this guy. So they had to figure all that out while also handling all these other cases. And that's all in a day's work for a Hollywood fixer. So overall, guys, I liked Hail Caesar. It's definitely not the Coen Brothers' best film by any means, but it's definitely not their worst film. I think they've made much worse films than this one. But I like this movie. I like the idea of a Hollywood fixer. I liked some of the originality that went behind this movie, but it's just not quite as clever as some of the other Coen Brother productions. So for my positives and negatives of Hail Caesar, I like that original Hollywood fixer concept. I really don't think we've seen a concept play out like this in a movie before, and I think that that's kind of interesting. I think it's unique how they have this guy who goes around like really all like literally all over Los Angeles and California and Hollywood, just making sure that everything's in line, that everything's going as planned, that all these productions don't get behind schedule or anything like that. I think that's an interesting idea for a movie. I also like how Hail Caesar looks and feels like an old movie. There's a lot of scenes in here, specifically when the fixer goes to certain productions of these movies. It really does remind us that this is in the 50s. Like, this movie takes place in the 50s. And so, like, the way that actors and actresses act on the set, the way that they speak, the way that certain matters are handled, you can definitely tell that the movie rating system wasn't out yet because everything had to be carefully said in these movies. And it just looks and feels like an old movie. Even some of the makeup on some of the actors in this movie look like something out of the 50s. And I think that's something really interesting here. There's also some great and careful attention to detail. One thing I can say without spoiling the movie as well is there's a cowboy actor who's kind of like the John Wayne of the movie. He's kind of like the actor that's always in these big westerns at the time. There's a scene where he's taking a girl out to dinner and they're having spaghetti, and what he does is he takes one of the spaghettis and uses it like a lasso, and that's supposed to reference spaghetti westerns. So there's small little clever things like that that the Coens paid close attention to that I think are really interesting about this movie. I also like Josh Brolin's character and his performance. This is a very good Josh Brolin performance. I thought he really nailed this Hollywood fixer role that he's literally always on the move from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night. He's always out and about doing something, meeting with clients and talking to actors, talking to actresses, talking to producers, talking to directors. He's always out and about trying to figure out if he can fix a certain thing about a production. And it's just really interesting how this character was handled, and I thought Josh Brolin gave a really good performance in this movie as well. Tilda Swinton's in the movie, and she plays kind of this 1950s film journalist. I really liked her character because it was really consistent of how they handled her, how she was always kind of bugging Josh Brolin, trying to get details from him. He's like, oh, no, 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 don't publish that yet. You know, there's this certain thing going on, and, you know, there's this one detail that hasn't been worked out yet. And so she's like, we need the truth, Eddie. I need to write it down in my journal. I need to post it in the Time magazine. Everybody needs to know this. They need to know about the actors and the actresses. They need to know about this. And so there's all these little things, like little back and forths about them. And she just handled her character very well, was a very consistent character, always curious to see what was going on. She's kind of the fixer's worst nightmare because he's trying to fix things. He's like, oh, no, 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 I'm fixing it right now. It's not official yet. So there's small little things between her character and his that were really interesting. And once again, going back to her, really good performance from Tilda Swinton. I also like how the film handles how the movie industry is then and now, how certain things from then are still relevant now, how certain things back then were specific for back then and they aren't exactly specific for now. It shows, if this big Hollywood actress is having a baby, everybody in the news has to know who the father is, and everybody, if the actress is pregnant on the set, how can they hide that? How can they take this guy who's always in westerns, and if they figure out he's bad in dramas, how can they make it work so that for that one drama it'll work? And so there's small little things like that that I think are still relevant today that really were relevant back then. And I think how they handled the whole movie industry thing, I thought was well handled in this movie. For my negatives of Hail Caesar, it's not a terribly funny movie. I mean, there's funny little moments, there's funny little chuckling moments in the movie, but it's not terribly funny. It's definitely not the Coens' best comedy. I think that's one reason why I don't consider it one of their best films, just because the comedy aspect really was not as good as some of their other films. Some of the jokes really work pretty well. Some of them really don't work at all. It's just not a terribly funny movie. So if you're expecting to really laugh in this movie, Hail Caesar doesn't do that as well as you might want it to. I also thought this was a somewhat weak execution of a movie. There's obviously certain attention to detail, and obviously the performances are really good in the movie and everything like that. But there's just certain parts of it that don't really feel like high caliber Coen movie. It doesn't really feel like the next No Country for Old Men, and there's not really a moment in this movie where it's like, oh well, this is going to be the next No Country, or this is going to be the next Fargo, or this is going to be the next Big Lebowski. There's really not an execution aspect of this movie that feels like that. I also thought there was too many characters in this movie. There's a lot of celebrities in this movie, and that's awesome. That goes to show that a lot of people love working with the Coen Brothers. There we go, and obviously that allows you to have really cool cameos in your movie. But there's just so many characters in this movie. There's literally characters in this movie that are in the movie for no more than 2 minutes, and there are big notable people who play some of these characters, like Frances McDormand, who's even married to Joe Coen. Her role in this movie was probably less than 2 minutes long. Jonah Hill, his performance in this movie was basically already shown in the trailer, and I have a later comment about that as well. But there's just a lot of characters in this movie. I think the Coens could have cut down a lot of them. A lot of these characters did not need to be in this movie. It felt like a kind of cast you would use in 3 different kind of movies. So there was just way too many characters in this movie. There's also some extremely random moments, and some of those moments make no sense at all. One thing I will say, I won't really go into detail, but I will say just because it's briefly shown in the trailer, and they make it look like a big moment, and it's not. But it's a completely random moment when you watch the movie, and it made no sense. It's the scene with Channing Tatum on a submarine. That's all I'm going to leave it at. It's in the trailer. In the actual movie, it makes no sense why it's there. I also thought the movie had a pretty weak ending. It just kind of randomly ends at a random time in the movie. It obviously ends around times where things are starting to wrap up and everything, and that's nice. But I thought they ended it at a very random time. It just felt very random how they ended it, just like how there was other really random moments in the movie. I also thought the trailers for this movie gave way too much away. Like I said, they literally show everything Jonah Hill does in this movie in the trailer. They literally show almost everything that Scarlett Johansson does in the trailer. They literally show what Frances McDormand does in the movie, literally in the trailer. They showed way too much. I really think they could have found a better editor to make sure that not too much was revealed, because unfortunately some of the really funny jokes in this movie were already shown in the trailers and promotions for this movie. But overall, guys, I'm going to give Hail Caesar an 8 out of 10. It's a good movie. I love the concept. It feels like an old movie. It has very close attention to detail, which I always love. Josh Brolin gave a great performance. He has a really interesting character to play. Tilda Swinton had an interesting character to play, and she also gave a great performance. I like how the movie industry was relevant then and now, how things are still relevant now, and how things were specific for back then. But it's really not that funny of a movie. It's a pretty weak execution of a film. There's way too many characters and cameos, some extremely random moments that make no sense at all. It's a very weak ending to a movie, and I thought the trailers gave way too much away for this movie. So 8 out of 10 from me. It's a good Coen Brothers movie, but it's not their best film. It's really not their best film. It's a good movie, though. If you like the Coens, maybe give this a chance at Redbox. I don't think it's necessarily a must-see in the theater, but I think if you really like the Coens, it's worth a Redbox rental. It's not the, like I said, it's really not their best work. So, good movie, just not a great movie.